After you've stitched, you don't need to press yet, but here's what it looks like. So there's the beginnings, and we have paper under SS2 but no papers under SS1. Now what we do, we're going to finish this one unit, and let me slide these. These are our SS1, 2, and 3 in order, so leave them in order. And you can see here we've done 2 and 1. Now we're going to take SS3, flip it over, and put it on top of SS2. You always put the higher number on top. We find our seam line and then our stitching line from prior, where we did the paper piecing, and put the pin in and then check. And that pin is right in the ditch between the two fabrics. Then estimate a 1/4 inch down and put your pin right along in the ditch of the two fabrics, and estimate a 1/4 inch down and put it in there and check it. And that's pretty close. That's right on the line. Your pin needs to be right on the line, and it on the sewing line, and it has to be in the ditch of the two fabrics. If it's not on the line of the already stitched fabric, it's not as important as being a 1/4 inch, being on this seam line, this line you're going to stitch on, because what you want to do is match the two intersections. So we hold this up again, and we see that it's perpendicular. Take a little bite and put the pin in. Then do the same thing on this side. Put it right along the seam line. Put the pin in the seam line against the stitches, and check that it's in the ditch here between the two fabrics. And then come down about a 1/4 inch where this ditch is. Put your pin there, and let's check our accuracy. And it's pretty close. I'm going to move it up just a little bit. Move that up. And that's better. So that's on the seam line better. Perpendicular, and then take a little bite. And this is what it looks like. Now we'll do the same thing. Once you're happy with the pinning and you've got that right, then flip it over, and you're going to take out the SS2 paper. This one's going to be a little bit harder because you've stitched, so you need to take off these little pieces first. I pull these little pieces off by pulling towards the stitching is sort of away, and then pull this part off and pull this paper off, and just keep the pins where they are. The paper will just tear around them. Pull this and pull the papers off. Pull this and pull the papers off. Now those papers are out of the way, but you still have the paper on the top, the SS3, so you can stitch on your stitching line. Now here we've stitched SS3 to SS2, and you see the papers are still on. And always check to make sure this is what you want your diamond to look like. And for my diamond, I had the solid black at the point, the polka dot in the middle, and then the light fabric, and then the darker fabric on the side. So this looks how it's supposed to look, and now you know everything will turn out fine. Then you can take the papers off of this SS3. After all the papers have been removed, you're going to press, and you always press to the lower number. So this is SS2, you'll press towards SS1. This is SS3, you'll press towards SS2. So this is what it looks like when it's finished. I wanted to show you something. For mine, this is the outer point, and this is the inner point that makes the star. On this edge, everything is straight. Everything lines up and it's a continuous straight edge. But on this side, at these two seam lines, there's going to be a little notch. So here is the little notch right here, and that's perfectly normal. as long as these lines are straight. It just sort of skips over that little bump, but that's fine. And then it does it again right down here. This little bitty notch. Just all you care about is that this is a straight line going from fabric to fabric. That's perfectly fine. Anytime I stitch one of these Lone Star units, sometimes they all follow the same process. This is a smaller one, but sometimes there can be 5, 6, 7 of these along here, depending on how big the star is. And you can have 4 or 5, I don't know how many of these rows. You'll have SS1, S2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It just depends on how big the star is and how many diamonds you have. But the process is all the same. You do it the same way. But what I like to do when I do any of these is first do a sample. Do it through completely. Make sure it's perfectly exactly what you want. Because oftentimes they'll have a couple of these switched and the whole design is all off. So if you do that, if you stitch them all at once at the beginning, you'll have to redo all of them. And in most cases, if you have to redo these units, you'll have to cut new fabric for sure, because you've got it all cut up. Once you've cut it into these strips, it's all cut. And it's really difficult to take these little pieces and say move this piece and exchange these 2 pieces, because they've all been cut and they're the exact same size. So what people normally have to do is get extra fabric and get extra papers. So be very careful when you're working on these and just make sure it's right. So you'll always have this to compare to, that, oh yeah, this is S1, that's in the right spot, and this is in the right spot. But once I do this one, and I'm very happy with it, I will pin all of my 2s to all of my 1s. So you'll have 7 more to do. And I'll go through and pin, make 7 pieces, 7 sets of these all pinned. I'll take all 7 to my machine and sew them. When you're all finished, you have 8 of these Lone Star units, all pressed, all the papers removed, and just put them aside. You can put them back into bag A1 or just put them off to the side. And once we're ready to assemble the quilt top, we'll come back to these.